Okay, so to start assignment 7 and the spot illustration, we need a sketch to work off of. So I made kind of a digital sketch, which combines something that I made by hand, just with pencil and then scanned into the computer, but I could do that taking, a picture of it and then cleaning it up. And then I composited on top of it some drips and blobs and then kind of erased away. This is the spot illustration idea I want to pursue. So how do I do that? Well, first I need to bring that sketch into a program that I can trace it in. And there's a few ways to get clean line art. It's called digital inking. And I'm going to try to show you all of them, which is challenging. But the first thing I'll do is we'll go to Chrome and we'll use the links in our class, right? And we're going to use these programs, vector.com and photopea. So I'm going to open up vector.com in a new window. And I'm going to open photopea.com in a new window. Then I'm going to move those windows into the same browser window so I can work between them one-on-one. Now the first thing I need to do is to get my sketch into the program, right? So I just have to upload my sketch, just like putting it onto PhotoBucket or something. Just like we did with our sketches for our vector logos. So I'll start with vector. It's very simple. I get my sketch. It's a PNG here. Maybe it's a JPEG from your camera, from your phone, whatever. And you just drag and drop it in. And there it is. You don't have to worry about its resolution. This is 640 by 640 pixels, but it doesn't matter because we're going to be making vector line art on top of it. In Photopea, you have to say open from computer. So to make it easy, I'm going to drag this to the desktop just so it's easy to navigate to. And then I find it from my desktop or from recents. And I call it Apocalyptic Chicken Panic. And now that's open. Okay, so I have it open in both. So how do I start doing clean line art? Well, I need to make new layers because the whole idea is to get something really clean and separate, right, from my sketch. So I'm going to make a new layer in Photopea, and then I'm going to lock the background layer so I don't mess with it using the padlock. Oh, lock all, the position and the pixels, right? And now I'm going to label this my black. So that is the layer we're going to be working on at the beginning of next class. So you need to come to class with a sketch in mind and a pretty refined sketch, or at least a pretty clear vision of how you're going to do your line art digitally. So in vector, how can I reproduce that? Well, I have the image here. I'm going to lock that image. But before I lock it, I'm going to turn its opacity down in these properties to the right. And I'm going to turn it down to about 50%, just like we did with our logo sketch. This is called onion skinning. And then I'm going to lock it. And now whenever I do a new tool, like the pencil tool, which is a good tool to use for this, as soon as I start drawing with it, and I'm just using a mouse, right? It will automatically make a new path. But because I'm going for line art, not solid shapes, I don't want to fill in the background color or the fill. I instead want the stroke or the border, and I want it to be black. And it's already there. And then I want it to be a certain size. So I'm going to pick, I think, for this spot illustration, maybe 5 pixels centered. And that's a start, right? Now, there is a pen tool in Photopea and in Photoshop. And I'll show you these things next class in Photoshop and in Illustrator. And so I could draw it with the pen tool and do the similar thing as in the vector program. The problem is it's based on the resolution of this image. So before I do any of that, I want to be mindful that this is a raster image, you know, and there are the pixels. And that's already not very smooth. So I brought in my sketch and it was kind of lower resolution. So before I do anything else within a raster program like Photopea or Photoshop, I need to change the image size to make it print quality. And so I'm going to change it to inches, and I'm going to change it to be around 10 by 10 inches by 350, our lab standard pixels per inch. You know, better than professional. And it's going to resample, so it's going to blur it a little bit because I'm forcing a smaller number of pixels to be a much larger number of pixels, but it's still perfectly visible, right? But now that quality allows me to make a new layer on top. And what I'm going to do with that new layer is use the brush tool. And with the brush tool, I'm going to set it to be 100% hardness. And I'm going to set it to be a size, especially if I'm just using a mouse or a trackpad like I am, and not using a stylus, which makes this a whole lot easier. So if you have a stylus and a tablet at home, definitely use it. But I'm trying to show you how to do it within the most limitations. So I'm going to use 24 pixels, and I'm going to use black as my color, right? So I have to pick my foreground color. And now on a new layer, I can start, whoops, how did that happen? Swap. So I want to use black. And I'm going to call this my black ink layer. And now when I paint, I'm just going to try to have kind of the most steady line I can. Now this is an interesting feature in Photopea. You see how bumpy that is? It's hard to be really clean. It's just like inking by hand. It's hard to be really clean. So what if we turn the smooth to 100%? And then I try again. You'll notice that it smooths it out for you. But it also renders a lot more slowly. So 100% is probably too much. Let's try about 50%. So you want to dial in your settings so that you get the kind of line art you want. And make sure you're at a high enough resolution to begin with. Come on. And this will work a little bit faster if I close some other programs too. I'm recording both for Zoom and for YouTube right now. So it makes sense the processing load is a little high. But do you see how that's smoothing my marks for me? It's pretty nice. And I'm just using a mouse. I don't have any kind of pressure sensitivity. But it basically puts kind of training wheels on my digital inking. And I like that feature a lot. It makes it more like a vector. So you see how that's a lot smoother. I'm going to keep going with that. Just slow. But that is a lot smoother than doing it at 0% smooth. So it depends how much detail you need to pick up. Now, because these are raster, these are real pixels. So then I have to delete the ones that I don't like, right? And so it's just like inking something in the real world. It's not going to save each path for you and allow you to alter it. These are real pixels you're putting down. And it's really nice to have that smooth function, but also don't become obsessive compulsive about it. Just like using ink pens, you do the best you can, but often, especially around corners, you slow down. You might choose a slightly smaller size, right? And stretch it out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save these. I'm going to save it as a PSD out of PhotoP. So I have my background and then I have my black ink layer separate so that I can turn it off and see just what the line art is on its own. Okay, good. And then in vector, I'm going to do the same thing. I can use the pencil tool or the pen tool. I can start to draw. It's going to give me a lot of straights, but then I can go back in and modify and turn them into curves. Right. I think I said 8 pixels. No, 5 pixels. And on, right? Whoop. Come on. So for the pencil tool to be most effective and pick up some of your detail, because this oversimplifies, you have to kind of zoom in and go a little slower. And then it will make more anchors. Right? And here I want to build each of them individually. So you can see some of the different methods available to you. But you want your line art to be at print resolution. So as a vector, you don't need to worry about the resolution because it can be any resolution. But if you do it in PhotoP or Photoshop, you want to make sure you're at least at 10 by 10 inches by 350 pixels per inch. So that our line art is nice and clean, because in a raster program, it's made of pixels. So if we look at those pixels up close, you'll see they're not a vector. They're not perfectly clean, but they'll be clean enough for their size, right? Where the vector is always perfectly clean. Okay, so let's save them, and then you'll know where you need to be at the beginning of next class. Have a sketch ready to do digital inking. So to save within vector, I have to export, and I want to export it as an SVG, right? And it's always going to be untitled, so then I'll go in and title it, and then I'll move those into my folder. So organizing is always important. The problem with these browser-based programs is that they don't automatically give you the option to name your file or to save them to the desktop. So you have to stay very organized. So I'm going to call it. So I've got a new folder now. This is where I'm going to put these files. They're in my downloads. I have an SVG from Vector, and I have a PSD from PhotoP. completely free